am back in my kitchen with another recipe. This week I have a cheesy corn and bacon chowder, which is so delicious. I'm really excited to share this with you. So I am not a huge fan of bacon. Some of you may know that from my past cooking classes and things. But I do like turkey bacon. I think it's a little less harsh, a little less pungent. And it typically tends to be not too salty or greasy. So I'm offering both in this week's meal kit. So I originally had this recipe with turkey bacon, and I think it's delicious. You get a little bit of smokiness, which really lends to the whole flavor of the soup or the chowder. But you can also do regular bacon if you enjoy it. So either way, it is delicious. And the best part about this recipe too is that it's a lot lighter than most chowders. So we're gonna be utilizing lots of vegetables. We're gonna be doing a pureeing technique that will make it really creamy without the use of heavy cream. So let's get started, shall we? So I have my pot preheating. So this is just a soup pot that I have here, and I'm doing a 2-person kit, and this is gonna pretty much fill this pot. So if you are doing a 4-person kit, you're gonna want a bigger soup pot for this. So the first thing that we're gonna do is start cooking our bacon, because this is gonna take a minute. We want our bacon to get really nice and crispy so that we can kind of crumble it up. And we're gonna sprinkle some of it in the chowder when it's all said and done, and the rest of it is gonna go on top as a garnish. So we want to get this going in a hot pan. I'm not gonna add anything else to this. Now, we do want to do it in the same pan because we want that flavor to stay in here, and because we're gonna be adding the vegetables afterwards, and we kind of want all the flavor to stay in one pot. So it does take a little bit longer because we are sauteing, or we are kind of pan frying this, and we're gonna be doing about, for me it took about 4 minutes per side to get nice and crispy with a good high heat. So that's a total of 8 minutes. But in that 8 minutes, we can work on preparing the rest of our vegetables, which is great. So, because we do have a little bit of chopping in this dish. So we want to go ahead and, let's just go ahead and get our veggies ready. We might as well, because that's what we're gonna be adding after. So we have our potatoes. These are the Yukon Golds, which get really nice and have kind of a creamy mouthfeel, so they're gonna lend to, when we puree half the soup, they're really gonna make this nice and creamy. I'm just adjusting the heat here to make sure that I have a nice sizzle going on. Again, I want a nice crisp on my bacon. So then we have our red bell pepper and our onion and our garlic here. So make sure you give everything a good wash. Scrub your potatoes off, wash off your bell pepper, and we can just start chopping everything. So we're gonna go ahead and start with our pepper, just pulling out, and give it a nice chop. Red bell pepper done. Next up, onion. Onion done. While I was chopping up my onion, I also flipped my bacon so it's cooking on the other side. Next up, let's chop up our potatoes. Potatoes mostly done. I saved one to show you. We need a really nice fine dice on all of these veggies, especially the potatoes, so that they can cook nice and quickly, because the smaller they are, the more surface area, the quicker they'll cook. So what I do is I just kind of cut the potato into kind of these planks, and then from here I cut them into kind of fry shapes, and then we turn and we get a nice fine dice. So remember, a dice is like a little cube-ish, so we're looking for something like that. And the bacon is pretty much done. I was just gonna get this finished up, and then we can take our bacon out of here. We're gonna reduce the heat slightly because we're gonna add oil to this pan, so we don't want it too hot. So whoops, one for the counter. Nice crispy bacon. I'm just gonna put it, and it'll crisp up a little bit too once it comes to room temp, so I'm just gonna go ahead and put it on here. If you have regular bacon, you can set it like on a paper towel lined sheet if it's greasy. Don't clean up the grease in your pot. You can just add everything to it, because again, that's gonna add to flavor. So from here, we're gonna add the oil. And then we're gonna add in all of our veggies that we just chopped up. And then these are gonna go for about another 8 to 10 minutes until they get really nice and soft and fragrant. The onions are translucent. We're just gonna let these guys go. So make sure you give it a good toss. Adjust the heat so you have a nice sizzle going on, and start the timer for 8 to 10 minutes, and I'll meet you right back here. Okay, so at this point my veggies have been sauteing. They smell so good. The onions are definitely getting super soft, as well as the red bell pepper, and the potatoes are browning a little bit, smelling really delicious. So at this point, what we're gonna do is we are going to go ahead and mince up our garlic. Lots of beautiful garlic for this. I'm not gonna add it in too early. We just want to make sure it does hit the pan, the heat of the pan a little bit before we add more things and more liquids and things like that, to really bring out that beautiful, beautiful garlic flavor. Okay, right in the pot. We're gonna cook this just for about a minute or two, along with the corn. We're gonna go ahead and add in the corn now. It's really gonna bulk up our dish. It is corn chowder, so we need a lot of corn. Oh, as soon as that garlic hits the pan, holy smokes, does that smell good. Okay, so let that kind of cook down just for about a minute or two. Couple things. Next up, what we're gonna have is the seasoning. So in the seasoning, pretty simple here. We've got salt, pepper, and paprika, and we also have a little bit of flour as well. So I just kind of put it all into one thing. The flour, it's just 1 tablespoon, but it is going to really kind of help thicken things up a little bit when we add the broth. It's just gonna kind of help to create a little thicker of a broth. And it's gonna get even thicker when we puree half of our soup. So again, we have paprika, just regular paprika, salt, pepper, and the flour in here. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and sprinkle this in. Tap that all out. We're gonna give it a big old stir. Make sure that everything gets incorporated. You'll be able to smell that paprika once it hits the heat. It smells so good. We're gonna cook that down for just about a minute. Lovely. So cook that down for about 1 minute. Okay, so about 1 minute has passed. Now we're gonna turn up the heat, and we're gonna be adding in our vinegar. So this is gonna really give us a beautiful flavor base, and we wanna kind of cook it down a little bit. It's also gonna pull up anything that was at the bottom of our pan, especially from maybe like the bacon earlier, and any little brown bits that we want incorporated into our soup that gives it flavor. So again, turn up the heat, because when we add the vinegar to our pan, we want it to kind of sizzle right away. So open that up. We have a mixture. We have white balsamic, which is a little bit sweet, a little bit fruity. It plays beautifully off of the sweet corn, and then red wine vinegar, which is just kind of my all-purpose vinegar that I like to add. Okay, add in. I hear a sizzle. That's what we want. Go ahead and, as soon as we add that in, be careful of your nose. It can be kind of pungent. We want to go ahead and give the bottom a stir and pull up any brown bits off the bottom. And let that cook for about a minute. In the meantime, make sure that you have, if you have a 2-person, you're gonna have 2 cups of water. If you have a 4-person, you're gonna have 4 cups. And then we have our broth paste right here. So this is the roasted chicken broth paste, and it's my favorite thing. It's so delicious. It's better than bouillon. They have it in all kinds of, flavors and things. And it's 1 teaspoon per 1 cup of water. So we have 2 cups, so we have 2 teaspoons here, and I think we're ready to add. So what we're gonna do is I like to use a butter knife. Make sure you scrape every little bit of this out, because we want all of that flavor in our soup, not the cup, right? Okay, So add that right in, and then we're gonna go ahead and kind of stir in our water. Beautiful, just like that. Just give it a really good stir so that broth paste gets incorporated. Now from here, this is when we need to cook down our soup a little bit. This is going to really soften the potatoes and get all the flavors melded together. So we want to let this simmer for about 8 to 10 minutes. So start your timer. We want to bring it to a boil first, so crank up the heat. We're going to bring it to a boil, then reduce it down to a simmer, and then once it hits the simmer, that's when you start your timer for about 8 to 10 minutes. So I will meet you right back here then. Okay, so our soup was bubbling away. It is done simmering, so now is when the magic happens. So I've turned off the heat completely. I'm gonna grab this glass measuring cup because I'm gonna transfer about 2 cups of this. And this is where we're gonna blend. So I'm gonna be using my immersion blender, which means I can go right in here. It works really, really well. If you don't have an immersion blender, you can also use a regular blender. You can use a food processor, a Ninja. Just be careful when transferring hot liquid. So I highly recommend using an immersion blender. This is a great tool to have in the kitchen. You can do so many things with it. And it makes pureeing hot things a little bit safer. So I'm gonna go ahead and carefully transfer about 2 cups of this. Just like so. And if you want it all pureed, you can do that, but I like some chunks in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Okay. And then you wanna make sure that the holes are completely submerged, otherwise the liquid's gonna shoot out. That's why I kind of like to do something a little bit taller, or blend in something a little bit taller. And look too, the blade is deep set in there, so you can go all the way to the bottom and the blade is not going to hit the bottom, so you don't have to worry about that with an immersion blender. Okay, and now we blend. It's starting to get really, really silky smooth and beautiful, and I want this to be really nice and smooth. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to add just half of the milk. We're going to leave this is the butter in the milk. We're gonna leave the butter floating in here, but we're just gonna add a little bit of that milk to this. We're gonna save the rest and we're gonna add it to our entire soup in just a minute, but I'm gonna add half the milk and blend. Okay, this is creamy, thick, and absolutely beautiful. Look at that. So we're gonna add that right back into the pot, scraping out every last delicious bit. Right away, it's gonna just transform this soup into a beautiful, creamy chowder. So we're gonna add the rest of the little bit of milk and butter. The butter is just gonna make it silky smooth. And I'm just using whole milk here. Excellent. So my heat is off. My heat is completely off because this is hot. And I just want the butter to kind of melt in here. We're gonna grab our bacon. If you have regular bacon, you can probably crumble yours up. The turkey bacon doesn't crumble super easily. I just like to get kind of uniform pieces. So I'm just running my knife through. And we're gonna add a little bit of this to the soup itself. And then we'll save the rest for topping. So I'm gonna save that for topping. We have our green onions, slice off the tops. And again, I like to do half in the soup, or I guess a third in the soup. And then save the rest for topping. Right in. And same with the cheddar cheese. So put some of that in. We're gonna save the rest for topping. Stir that all together, look at that. Look at that chowder, you guys. Oh my goodness. Ooh, one last thing. Do not forget this, super important, lime. So I'm gonna squeeze in a little bit of lime juice at the very end when it's all said and done, right before serving. Give it a good stir. You can save the rest of the lime wedges for serving. and you have this beautiful corn chowder. It is so delicious. Don't forget to add your toppings. It's even better the next day, just like many, many soups are. I hope you guys enjoyed this recipe. It's really good. A little bit something different and perfect for these chilly days that we're having. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. I'll see you all next time.